Well, it sure is hard to resist being outside on a day like this. Kind of a little early preview on spring. I mean, 68 degrees, just beautiful. And I wanted to come right outside to paint anything. I really didn't care what I was painting. I started out with some great light, some nice dappled sunlight. But as the afternoon wore on, that kind of gave way to some clouds and overcast. And so my colors and my subject all kind of turned a little bit gray. But at least I was still able to get a nice view on the composition, establish how I wanted that to look, establish where I wanted everything. And you'll see coming up here in a bit that I was able to get a photograph the next morning that really gave me some options with color and light. So yeah, this is a great kickoff to Plein Air 2019. Alright, so I'm back in the studio today to finish this. This is where I left it in my plein air session. And a lot of fairly flat values. I did do a little bit of light modeling just to kind of establish how I wanted to break down the scene. It's a very gray scene, so I am adding a good bit of color. This is what I was actually seeing yesterday afternoon. And I had some overcast clouds and it was starting to get dark. So you can see the lighting is fairly flat and dull, but it was enough for me to kind of get an idea for composition and kind of see what some of the branch values were doing. But I wasn't really happy with the lighting situation. I was looking for more drama. So I went out this morning and took this, and this is more what I'm looking for. So I'm going to incorporate some ideas with this. I like the drama of the light hitting the sides of the trees. And you can see where some of the branches here are in shadow, and then they go into white, sort of very brightly lit. But you can see some of that branch structure very well. It's kind of neat. So I'm probably going to try to incorporate this. And as I work towards the end, you're probably going to see me bring in some gouache. And this is how I like to proceed. I like to go as far as I can with transparent watercolor, and I still got more to do there. and bringing gouache then where I need the opaques. So at this point I'm just going to start fleshing out my scene and a little more substantial detail and establishing where everything is, bringing values more in line, and then deciding more what ideas and what values need to be portrayed in gouache. The thing about gouache that's so neat is I could repaint this whole scene or paint over this scene. Just consider this the bare minimal underpainting and come back with gouache and almost reconstruct it. Or I could just enhance it depending on what I end up with. So that's the advantage that gouache can give you. I like finishing my plein air in the studio. There are some plein air painters that are real good at doing the entire thing on location. I've never really been that good. I guess, maybe if I keep trying, I'll get better. I just can't see it. Can't see the piece in the proper light and see as well what needs to be done. So I concentrate on getting the scene well drawn, well placed, and composed, and what values rendered that I can. And then when I get in the studio, I can see so much better what I think I need to do. And it's a fairly complex scene, so figuring out how to handle contrast is a challenge. And you're trying to simplify at the same time. So I'm getting my value pretty close to where I want it with the watercolor. I'm going to start defining some of the dark parts of the branches now that are coming off of these trees, particularly the ones that come in front. And now you can see some of the faint branches that I painted yesterday just to mark where they were. And I'm being inventive with it. I'm not copying the reference. I mean, I'm pretty far departed from the scene. I just generally have a similar arrangement. But the reference still serves to give me a lot of great ideas about the shadow, the light, the structure of the limbs, things like that. And you still, at this stage, I still want to work from big shapes to little, so I'm not getting ready to put in the detail branches yet till I see where I end up with the structure. So in some ways I'm designing as I go. Designing the scene as I go. A lot of simplification. It's just a very chaotic scene. It usually is when you've got these winter branches. One of the things I really loved was the horizontal thrust of some of those branches, so I'm accentuating that. I think that lends well in the design and the composition of this. I also like the way the juxtaposition of certain branches that go back downward look. Really, the last thing you want to do is take a scene that looks so chaotic and keep adding detail until it starts to look chaotic. I mean, you're making, a piece of art here or depiction of art, almost an idealized version of it. At least that's what most artists would do. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm starting to feel the early morning light drama that I wanted to see. Starting to feel that, so that's great. So now I think I'm going to get in here with some gouache and see what happens. Now, gouache generally, depending on how much water is in the mixture, it will look much more opaque and much brighter when you first put it down. Then it will dry much darker. So usually what I do is I mix it to where I think it's right, let it dry, and I can tell. And a lot of times you just have to wait until you can thicken the mixture. In other words, get more pigment loosed with your brush, and it may take a little bit of back and forth. Because again, while it's first put down, it'll look very bright. So what I'm trying to do here is just pick out a few areas where I can light it up with bright highlights. A lot of gouache artists will put out gouache, white gouache, titanium white, fresh, because it's just easier to get to the opacity that you need, and you can do that. I usually just do it off the palette if I have some there. It just takes a few minutes. I'm using M-gram gouache here. I have it as part of my Schmincke palette. And another thing you can do is just, if it's still seeming pretty translucent, just put down a layer and then build it up. Go back. It's a frustrating part of working with gouache, because at first it's just you're gonna put it down, you're gonna go, oh yeah, that's just right, that's what I'm looking for. And then all of a sudden it'll dry and you'll go, oh man, what happened to those great highlights? This is part of working with gouache. And I like to get a little color in that white. If you put white right on there, right out of the tube, it looks unnatural. It's a cold white, and there's nothing in here that's cold. Everything is warm. So you either want to put down pure white and then glaze over it, or mix some color into it to begin with to warm it up, to match, whatever it is you're highlighting. I'm just trying to get some light coming in down on this little bit of underbrush here. And I'm trying to break up some of those edges. And it's almost better to get too white or too bright and then be able to knock it back. Well, that's one way to paint anyway. You can build up, but you can also get very bright. But gouache I like to paint thin with gouache, and gouache is very easy to knock back. When I say knock back, I'm talking about knock back the value. And I'm trying to use some gouache to get some light on this little bit of grass coming in. Alright, so I think now I'm going to bring in a small brush and try to start painting tops of these limbs that the light is catching. This is definitely a technique you don't want to overdo. And I've already marked some of these branches with dark paint. So I'm just pulling some highlights across the top. And you have to watch again and see how much this paint dries and darkens. And that will again depend on how much water was in your mixture. Especially where these branches cross over like a dark area. That's a good place to hit it. I got this one coming down here, and I'm just going to give it a little light on top. Where it's over a light background, you're really not going to see it, so I usually don't even worry about that. And most of this left out area where I left it bright is bright enough. And again, if I add gouache to that, you won't be able to tell. But some of these trees back here could use a little bit on the leading edge. just to brighten them up a bit. Some of those were catching the light pretty strongly. If I don't like it, I can knock it back by wetting it and blotting it and glazing over it. And sometimes the highlight on the top of the branch just brings it forward, you know. It gives the eye a little more indication that it's crossing over in front of something else. And at this point, I think I'm pretty much done. I'm just kind of picking at it. And I'm adding a lot of details, but it's mostly just to keep that effect of light, or enhance that effect of light. And at this point, I'm always tempted to do more than I need to do. But still, it's the great thing about gouache is if you get some of these too bright, as I mentioned before, you can come back with water and knock them back. You can easily glaze over them with dark color. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. I think that gets across the light of this morning's photograph that I got. And I'm going to just kind of look at that for a bit and see what I think. But I think that's more or less where I'll leave it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed coming along on this little plein air journey, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.